I call both of you up? Then you can it's hard for the mic. You'll step aside. Okay. But we had. Hi, everybody. Hope you can hear us. Welcome, everybody that's here in the auditorium. We have a small group of about 10 or 12, and I see online we're over 100 already. Thank you for everybody that's joining us. I'm Valerie Yantz. I'm one of the organizers of this training. We have a wonderful training today called Collective Leadership, Sense of Place Grounded in Hawaii. And I'm going to take you through a few introduction slides. If I get this working. You may or may not remember, we're members of the Western Region Public Health Training Center. And that is covers us in Hawaii, California, Nevada, the Pacific Islands, and Arizona, where the central office is. And we got good news yesterday that the continuing public health training centers got funded. And it was an extraordinary act with both sides of Congress and HRSA. So we are really excited that these training centers will continue. We hope you are with us. So our sponsors and partners are here in Hawaii, the Hawaii Public Health Training Hui, and the Office of Public Health Studies at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the Western Region. And then all of us are part of the National Public Health Learning Network. And we want to give special thanks to Queens Medical Center for letting us use, as a community partner, use this auditorium and their AV equipment and their fabulous staff that make this come out and sound so good, and we're able to record it. As I said, I'm one of the organizers. Two people that work behind the scene is Camille Cristobal, the social worker, and Christopher Hill, the Ches. He was just here on a visit. He's moving to Japan, but he's going to continue to help us remotely with the Ches. And then the wonderful thing for most of you, we do get continuing ed. We have it for 5 groups. The numbers that you would need to obtain are here, and we put it on the certificate of attendance. And as you know, there are 2 groups that ask for an extra step. I'll explain it in a minute. We do have to, when we apply for these continuing ed, do the linking professional competencies. So public health and nursing are the top 3 related to cultural competency and leadership, with managing dynamic diversity, interface, diversity need, organization and management change for the registered dietitian, nutritionist, leadership, behavioral change and team building, social work, and CHES is cultural awareness, leadership, social work methods and communication. So you can see they're all similar. They word them slightly different, and we have to fill that out on the applications. If you are requesting continuing ed, you know you need to do the feedback survey. And if you do that, at the end, Camille will be sending it to you, you will get a certificate. If you don't do it, we don't send it to you. It's the one way that you help us pay for this is in the numbers. For those who are phone in, though, we don't know who you are, so we can't send you a certificate if you don't also log in to the visual, even though you might be doing the the audio through the telephone. If you're telephone only, you have to email Camille or I with your telephone number and who you are. You should not wait more than till the end of the month if you don't get a certificate. Don't wait 2 or 3 months. The learning objectives, which were asked by the College of Nursing, who gives us continuing nursing education, they asked to be put on their slide. So we're going to hear about the Culture of Health project that's a Robert Wood Johnson project that has been implemented in Hawaii, the discussion of evidence-based leadership initiative, and the impact and desire outcomes. It's a pretty exciting time to hear about this wonderful grant. There are no financial disclosures from any of us, the presenters or the planners. And for the continuing ed, you, in addition to our feedback survey, you have to go to the College of Nursing at the University of Arizona and fill out their evaluation. I will put the link in the chat box when I get back to my computer. I don't know what that was going to be. It looks like a fun blank slide. Here is here's what their new, they've updated their website. So when you go to the College of Nursing at Arizona, this is what you will see. There's the link again, and then there's a second step for CHES. Here's a link of a continuing ed for CHES, because you have to put in your CHES number and we have to report it to CHES. That's the only reason you have to do that second step. That's a requirement for that continuing ed. And that's what this website will look like when you do that. You know it's on Zoom. If you need the Zoom instructions, they're here at the bottom. Some people still email me, can I hear this? I missed it. Yes, I posted on YouTube. So if you just put Valerie Yant's YouTube, you will find the site and you can click on, all of them are posted there. You can click on any you would like to hear again or download. We do have handouts. Camille sent them to you through our file drop at UH, but for those that are here, the blue one is very important. It's the same as the one that'll be emailed to all of the online, the evaluation. And then we used pink, but I think I've switched to I don't even know what color it is today, blue for the next speaker, and then the salmon color will be the certificate of completion, but you will get it emailed. On to our wonderful speakers we have today, Joan Takamori and Gloria Fernandez. They are both from the Department of Health, the Public Health Nursing. Joan is the branch chief and Gloria is the Leeward Nursing Section Supervisor. They have, they might sound familiar to you. They spoke last year and their bios are here. They both are doing amazing work for nursing in this state. Joan and Gloria and I have been friends for a long time, and one of the wonderful things, I knew Joan before she became the branch chief, and then when she was selected, I was jumping for joy because she's just full of great ideas, has wonderful leadership skills, and is very community oriented. She worked in the front lines for a long time, and she has a fabulous garden at her house. If you're ever around when it harvests, you reap her wonderful produce, and you can read the rest of the stuff there. For Gloria, we've known each other, and I knew her before she had her doctorate in nursing, and she's still wonderful, sweet Gloria, who just keeps us all moving forward. But the wonderful contribution she's doing in health literacy and emergency preparedness is a lot of the work is behind the scenes. I also am a MRC, so I do have contact with all the great emergency preparedness. So she is like the golden nursing degree winner with her bachelor's and master's and doctorate in nursing. And you can imagine the College of Nursing at Arizona was really excited when we put both of these people, because we have a very interprofessional team of speakers. So when we had a full slate of nurses on board for this month, they were very appreciative that you're spending your time doing this training. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. This is their title slide, and invite them up here and give them the leg. We're so happy you're here. Let's welcome Joan and Gloria. Hawaiians don't know them. So be sure to tell them.
Aloha. I want to thank you all for inviting us to continue to speak about the culture of health from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, as well as the project that we've continued to do through some of the funding. And I'll speak a little bit more about that. So a sense of place grounded in Hawaii is what we're going to be talking about in continuing to build that culture of health through leadership. So these are the objectives: review progress with the Culture of Health project implemented throughout Hawaii, discuss evidence-based leadership initiative and its aspects, and explore the impact and desired outcomes for the collective leadership partnerships. If you've been to our trainings, you know that a lot of the way in which we speak is more through talk story and stories about what we're doing in the field versus a lecture style. And I know we'll have some time for questions at the end. Oh, hang on. All right, so for Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, their vision is we as a nation will strive together to build a culture of health, enabling all in our diverse society to lead healthy lives now and for generations to come. And I'll speak a little bit later about the specific project. Now, if we take that vision and bring it here to Hawaii, you all who live, learn, work, and play here in Hawaii, we know that there are so many nuances about different communities in which we work. So the RWJF vision in Hawaii, we as a state will strive together to build the culture of health, enabling all in our diverse communities to lead healthy lives now and for generations to come. The key here is diverse communities. Think about the community in which you were born. Think of the community in which you live. Think of the community in which you work. How much do we truly know about that and that sense of place to integrate into the work that we all do? And I think the key thing is when you look at these communities, it can range from small to large, from Miloli'i to Waimanalo to Waianae to upcountry in Maui. It's very diverse. The different cultures from Pacific Islanders to the Asian cultures to so many Hispanic cultures, they're so diverse and all intertwined. But the key thing is how we all connect together as a community. We do, as public health nurses, work for the Department of Health, in which we've already integrated this into our strategic plan to create a culture of health throughout Hawaii, to take health to where people live, work, learn, and play, and invest in healthy babies and families. A key thing here in making health a shared value, it's not about us telling people what needs to be done. It's about really connecting with each other and learning from each other. But in order to do that, we also have to learn from ourselves and figure out where we come from first before we go in and support the leadership in building communities. So I'm going to give you a little background on the WJF grant that we received. I was part of a group of public health nurse leaders specific for this leadership program under WJF. And what they did was they gave us a grant to support a leadership program or something that was going to support building a culture of health. Thinking through what we wanted to do, we wanted to really look at how to make it specific to Hawaii. You look at culture of health, you look at their framework that defines multiple actions to help build this culture of health. You see stories on their website from all different parts of our nation. And what I think was really important is we already knew there are a lot of things also here in Hawaii at different levels, from small to large, with different communities. And I think that was really important that we really ground ourselves with this sense of place in Hawaii. And so what we did was, through this grant, we completed our first cohort, which we'll be speaking of. And since then, we found some funds to continue the project, to continue a second cohort. And that decision was made by the first cohort in this leadership program. So for leadership development, I want you all to think about, rather than doing this as telling you what it is, I want you to think about someone that you respect as a leader. Think about that person. Think about what those qualities are and what's that reason behind you having such utmost respect for this person. What is it about that person as a leader? Quite often we look at leaders as people who are administrators or in certain positions. To us, leaders can be anyone, especially those that we work with in the community setting. There's so many stories that we have about the work that we do in the community, and I wish I had more time to talk about them. However, these leaders, even within our communities, have so much to share, so much to even teach us about how they're doing things within their own community. So some ideas about leadership development and collective leadership. One of the things that I do want you to think about is we often get very tied to certain words, language, versus really thinking about the meaning of it. So rather than focus on collective leadership, collaborative leadership, shared leadership, it's really about how you take that concept and really look at how you define it and what makes sense. I think that's more important to really understand the meaning behind it versus the word. So it's about inspiring transformation, participation, collaboration, and commitment. So I'm hoping as you were thinking about those individuals that you see as leaders, I'm hoping that some of these concepts come up as you thought about that person or those people. Allowing equal partnerships, openness, transparency, and empowerment at all levels. How often do we see leadership positions where it's always been a hierarchy? How often do we see it where it's more horizontal? One of the ways in which I like to visualize is that when we think about leadership, I like imagining people side by side, regardless, if I use our program as an example, public health nursing branch chief, they will always, it's almost a way of saying they're looking up. I rather we look side by side to all these individuals within a program and empower each and everyone, because everyone comes with so much information. When we even take that to the communities in which we work, there's so much that I've learned in the communities that I've worked in, from the clients, from the people, the politicians, the different folks that I have to constantly work with in a community setting. From the person that's just living in a community that it's in very high poverty. They are an expert in the work that they do or where they live. And there's so much that we can learn from people. So it's really about, I like visualizing leadership as something that is horizontal and not a hierarchy, not vertical. Also, what we're doing is really integrating a Hawaiian context that sets up own community and place before doing. What that means is, think about the role that you play in healthcare. Think of what you do. Think of how much we know about where we come from. How much do we know about where others come from? If I am working in a community that I do not know anything about, the first thing that I do is really try to understand where they come from. If I'm working public housing and I'm at KPT, Kuhio Park Terrace, or Kalihi Housing, how do I truly know about where they live, and how am I to understand how to work with them? I really have to learn a lot. So it's really about understanding that community and that place before we do. And foundational leadership that strengthens our relationship to Hawaii. For those that are from different parts, Hawaii Island, East and West, from Kauai, from North Shore, Haena, to Waimea, to looking at all these different communities, how do we really strengthen that relationship of that sense of place here in Hawaii? So making health a shared value to our communities in Hawaii, one of the things that we look at is who we are. Who are we? What is our place? And what is our kuleana? The work that we do in public health nursing, I can speak to that, is when we are assigned to a community in which we work, I don't only work in a specific geographic area. I also look at the fact that I work within Hawaii. And what is my relationship with that community in which I work? How do I learn about that? But again, like I said earlier, how do I understand who I am, where I come from first, before I can truly understand other communities? So making health a shared value through a sense of place. what we started is we took a cohort of public health nurses that were in the field across Oahu, only Oahu at first. And what we did was we contracted and we worked with Cheryl Lupinoy of the Leader Project, who is now with the Kohala Center. And we looked at integrating a sense of place through leadership. So 4 concepts that we used, the first being place, a connection between health of the land and the health of its people. Culture, mindsets and behaviors of health and well-being held by members of the community. And community, environmental conditions and practices in the community leading to good health and well-being. Leadership, exploring as a community different ways to improve the health and well-being of the whole place. You can look at these 4 concepts, but how are we to just define what should be done versus how do we have those conversations and develop those relationships within the communities that will be impacted by the work that we do? So a key is really understanding that place. The photo we have there, for those of you that are familiar with Ho'oulu Aina, is the place in which we set this cohort and this leadership training was not in a building in 4 walls. What we chose to do is have this training or leadership development at Ho'oulu Aina under their hale outdoors, interacting with the environment in which we were. And so that is Puni, that has been working with us also throughout this program. Culture, the mindsets, how do we understand? We learn so much from the place, and you'll hear more stories about the work that we do with Ho'oulu Aina and what we've also learned from that place for us to begin to think, how do I take the work that I do, whether it be a public health nurse, whether I'm a health educator, whether I'm a public health official, all these different roles and positions that we hold, the work that we do, how do I take that, but truly understand it from the perspective of a community? And so I think those are some simple key concepts, is understanding that place in which we work. So making health a shared value through our sense of place. We often say, go into the mindset where we will say, this is important for you. How do we partner with that community to truly understand what we together can do? And not for us to lead, but us to support. But again, this leadership cohort was really to begin to support who we are as public health nurses that physically are located. Our workplace is in the community where people live, learn, and work. We try to keep people from ending up in acute care settings. What we also do is really try to partner with families and communities to really look at how do we do this better, differently, because the communities that I've mentioned earlier, what we do with health in Waimanalo versus Waianae versus other places will be so different. And we cannot have one way of doing it. It really has to have the mindset or the understanding of each individual community. So the place, again, providing a foundation for our group to lead. And that's where we began at Ho'oulu Aina, up in the back of Kalihi Valley. Culture defines actions and behaviors that the group will model. So there's a lot of the work that both Gloria and I and Cheryl Lupinui that have modeled ways of leadership in a different way. Community, which determines what leaders need to be responsible for. And leadership, uniquely emerged from the group's relationship and desires to sustain the effort. So often do we go into a program or a training where we say, Western, we do have to have those objectives. But a key part of this leadership program that we're doing for our public health nurses was specific to the process and what they got out. How can I define for someone what their experience will be? We've incorporated a lot of self-reflection, and we'll talk more about that, but a lot of thinking, sitting, and really reflecting on the work that we're doing to really integrate it so that it becomes more meaningful. And it's not just a concept that I'm saying, this is an objective that you will achieve after these 7 sessions. So I'm gonna pass this over to Gloria, who's gonna speak a little bit more about the project.
Hi, everyone. So one of the things that we looked at was place. And place is really it's a space that holds individual meaning to me or to you or to that community. And what we looked at was, who am I in this place? Who are we in this place? Am I of this place, or am I just at this place. And it held, as we asked these questions, it really did change how we talked about place and what sense of place is to each and every one of us. That helped us to start to create our identity and realize that maybe we had different identities in different places where we connected. We also looked at the relationships that we had in these places and who were they. Was my relationships different at church than at work or in the community or with my family? But one of the things that we found that held true through all of these places were the relationships that we formed and that we maintained at these different places. So it gave us our identity and trying to figure out, well, who are we or who am I? It looked at how we built self-esteem within our group. So were we able to connect to a place or the people that were there? A place where we were able to take care of ourselves, to be able to start to build our self-esteem when we worked in communities or when we went out into communities. We looked at the cultural connections that were there. The project was really about a Hawaiian sense of place and connecting through that Hawaiian sense of place. Our realizations is that when we work with communities, each community has its own different culture. So were we able to connect with that, or how did we make that cultural connection throughout our visits in the community? And then the last thing we looked at was connecting with the natural environment. The health of the land, is the life of its people. And what we realized was that we were outdoors, we were out there with living things. We were growing and we were able to connect, with that environment that we were in. When we looked at our culture really did, what we looked at was our connections, our relationships. Who were we connecting with? Were we connecting with the land? Were we connecting with each other? How did we develop those relationships? So connections was one of the things that we, as a group, as a cohort, the leadership cohort, that connections was an important thing for all of them. The other thing that we actually talked about for our leaders, and these were the behaviors that we were asking and actions that we were asking our leadership cohorts to model, was to listen. Listen first. When you're in the communities, when you're working with each other, when you're working with your schools, listen first. Listen to each other and listen to what the community voices have to say. We talked about acceptance. And so it was about accepting who we are as a person, accepting who others were. And the largest thing was really being able to look at and view health through a different lens, and that health comes in many different forms. And there is a right way and there is a wrong way, that we basically had our preconceived notions of, but understanding that health is viewed very differently by each of us. And that for some of us, being healthy means that we are connected, that we have those relationships, where others, being healthy means that we go jog 10 miles a day. But health had to be, we looked at it, that these behaviors on accepting that health really does look different to each and every one of us. The other behavior and action that we, as a group of leaders, learned about was about sharing. We shared about ourselves. We shared about what health meant to me as an individual, what health meant to the community, and whether or not we were so different. And the concepts that we kept coming back to really was place, relationships, and the relationships, that the connections that we had. And then we looked at trust. And we learned to trust each other to build, as our actions and our behaviors was really to learn about learning to build on strengths, trusting the next person that your strengths are needed here with me, and that what I'm good at, and or what I'm weak at, you're definitely good at. So I'm trusting you to come in and step in and do your job and help to take care of what needs to be done when we're working out there in the communities. One of the harder concepts that we looked at and we struggled with was the host guest concept. When we work in communities, we're usually invited in. And when we're invited in, most of the time as public health nurses, we're invited in as consultants or as facilitators or as leaders, healthcare leaders, wellness leaders in that community. However, we are a guest in that community. And so we learned about how to integrate being the host, but yet understanding that we are a guest there. And so I actually came across a quote that I thought was really funny. I was like, yeah, that kind of sums up how we look at communities or our understanding. But it says, don't worry about what you don't know. Be worried about what you think you know, but you don't. And it sums up the relationships that we have in communities where it's the agenda, but it's not my agenda. It is the community's agenda. We know the agenda, however, you really don't know what that agenda is. And so that host guest concept was something that we really had to build out with our leadership cohort. And understanding that you are being invited in, you do have a leadership role there, but do understand that you are a guest there also. The other thing that we looked at was the relationships. Again, it was a recurring theme through everything: relationships, fostering those relationships. And then stepping back and looking at, okay, community identified concerns and issues rather than what the public health nurse sees or what the school sees or what any government agency sees, and that we're listening to those voices of the community. Yes, there are times where as public health nurses or as government, we do need to do some straight directives. But when we do have these opportunities, we need to listen first and make sure that we're hearing the concerns from the community and that they're the ones identifying the issues. Decision making was also a big one for us in working with communities. Who's actually the decision maker? And realizations was that as a leadership cohort, we served as consultants and we offer recommendations, we offer suggestions, we offer connections or referrals. But ultimately the decision making is up to that person or that community. And then we talked about sharing leadership. Yeah, a lot of what we did centered around building on each other's strengths. And we wanted those actions and behaviors of the public health nurses going through this training cohort to really understand that we share leadership with community. We have one set of strengths, they have another. We complement each other. Anyone that's invited at the table has and comes with their own strengths. We just need to communicate a little bit more and a little better in order to share that leadership. And then we looked at leadership itself. And we looked at how leadership strengthened our public health nursing branch, or how we could use it to strengthen our public health nursing branch and within our own nurses. And we did. We have more nurses now that are willing to step up and become leaders within communities. Then we looked at risk taking. Wow, if we're asking someone else to do this, maybe we got to be able to do it ourselves also. And so it was putting ourselves out there and sharing a little bit of ourselves on what health was to us and understanding what health was to you or to your community. And that we do it with authenticity and that we are humble about it. And then again, our shared learning and our leadership was really some of the points that we drove home when we were going through this Culture of Health project.
So I have to add here, when we talk about the sharing that we did together as a group, It doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen at that first session. And to define that for another person can be very difficult. I think that was a huge part, that it had to go through this process, not something that we could define that session 1, this is what you will achieve. Session 2, this is what you will achieve. It was a true process, which I have to say, this process was a big, huge learning process for myself. It's an opportunity. We are so wired to doing the task. What do I have to do? Okay, we have to get this done. Great. We do too much, too fast, too soon. Yes, we have time. We're constrained by time a lot of times. However, one of the things that we have to do is really step back, to really think through. In order to make the work that we do much more meaningful, we have to take a step back, pause, and really look at what we're doing before just doing for the sake of doing. It's really about understanding, creating the relationship, and through this all, it was not just a project or a learning process for the staff, it was for us as well.
Right. And so, yeah, and to add to what Joan was saying, that a large portion of what Joan and I did with our planning was really to look at the environment so that it became an experience, not just learning and putting things into people's heads or doing. It became an experience that each and every one of them could own as they left for the day and take back into their sections. What we did was, here what you're looking at are the sessions that we had. So the first day, we actually began to create that space for leadership. So Joan's gonna go talk about that for a bit.
So the next 2 slides, I'll be going over the day sessions. Again, like I said earlier, we could not define every single session ahead of time before we even started. What the process was is we would meet to plan out what the intention was for that session, debrief after, and then plan for the next session. Otherwise, quite often do we set up these sessions or trainings and it will just go over someone's head if we did not truly connect. And I think that was a real important part. So I'm gonna go through the sessions. However, keep in mind, all of these sessions were not planned ahead of time. Prior to the initial session, it was after each session. So the first one, for the majority of the sessions, we did meet at Ho'olu'aina, which is that place up in Kalihi Valley that is connected to Kokua Kalihi Valley. And it was to begin to create a space for leadership. How can we ask for conversation, meaningful conversation, when we don't know each other, when we don't know this place? How do we get to create a space that's going to be safe for people to share? It didn't happen overnight, and it's not going to happen at the first session. It takes time. And it was accessing our stories around health, beginning to share a sense of place. So one of the first things that we did is we asked them to bring a symbol of what health means to you and your family. And it was amazing. I wish I could bring you guys there with us. I wish I taped it all. It was just wonderful to hear such different stories. But as we continue to hear the stories week after week, it really started to see patterns coming out of relationships, of connections. Day 2, it was building the lens. How do I view health? Each of the sessions, we had something different. We had what we called not homework, but pre-work for them to think about and to bring ahead of time, because we wanted people to have thought. We wanted them to think about this and not the night before, okay, what I gotta do again and what do I have to bring for tomorrow? But really to get into that mindset of thinking about, what does health mean to us? How can we create a value of health, a shared value of health? How do we begin to do that before we cannot do that unless we begin to look at where we come from first. Day 3 was we began to look at where a sense of place is. And so what the group decided to do is 2 of the members actually wanted to host a session out at Kalailoa with Uncle Shad. And so what we did was we met at Kalailoa Heritage and Legacy Foundation. And what we began to do is start to think about what is our sense of place and our connections. And so one of the things that we asked them to do is think about where I was born, where I live, where I work, but most of all, where am I from? And that began this discussion there at Kailua that continued on to the other sessions. Day 4 at Ho'olu'aina, we continued the discussion about our journey, about who we are. Begin to understand health through our sense of place. So what we had is more discussions about what that journey looked like. How did we begin to create what we call our journey map? Where we've been, where we've come to, where I'm from. Day 5, it was continuing to develop who we are as a group. Again, day 1, to come together as a group on the first day, we really needed to set it up so that we found time to think through and reflect how we're coming together as a group. And what we began is to start to shift from an individual perspective to a group identity of who we are. Then day 6 at Ho'olu'aina, continue to think about our journey and developing our leadership toolkit. The next couple of slides, I will talk about some of the tools that we began to develop as part of this leadership toolkit in a different way. And then day 7 was building leadership skills, leadership in public health nursing branches community. How do we take this and how do we apply it in the communities in which we work? Now, although we only had 7 sessions, and we really wanted a lot of reflection from the participants to think through who I am and how we became who we are as a group. And then how do we begin to take that into the communities in which we work? So some of the tools, some of the leadership tools that we actually use and integrated into this whole process was food. What is the symbol of health to me and my family? Or bring a food. If you think about what is a food, some food that is meaningful to you and your family that represents health. We use symbols, a symbol of health. We had different people sharing different things about what health meant to them. What we have is on that photo there is part of some of the tools that we started with is also a journey map. We also did a lot of journaling where if you saw one of the first pictures where we were outside in Ho'olu'aina or Kailua, what we did was we spent a lot of time, and which is unusual because what we do is quite often we do too much, too fast, too soon, and we try to get things done, but it really makes you focus so much on the task versus the larger picture. And I think it was really important for us to integrate and put some time aside for them to walk around the area, think through, journal, draw, however they wanted to express that. What we'll also share is, at the end of this session, we will share a poem that came from the group. So we not only did we use stories, but we also looked at bringing together we are from. So this is just a photo of some of parts of the journey map that we did. So what we did was we actually, as we were asking them, where are you from? Where do you live? Where were you born? Where do you live? Where do you work? And where are you from? What started to emerge is stories about where they're from. And these journey maps started to come about, whether they wanted to draw it, write it, we all started to share. And it became a group where it was safe to really begin to be somewhat vulnerable to share some of what we were thinking about where we come from. Some of the thought process or some of the process that we integrated in here was to also allow a lot of time again for reflecting. So there was time that they could walk around the area, the environment, to really connect with the land and really to think about, what am I thinking about this? And so much of what we did was allow for a lot of time to sit and reflect and express it in whatever form that they wanted. So that's why we had the journaling, that's why we had the maps, some were drawing, and in different methods. Again, this slide just goes over some of the leadership tools that we did that I just went over: reflection, drawing, exploring communities. This is a photo of when we did a visit out at Kailua, and of course, storytelling. And Gloria, I'm gonna ask if you can share a little bit about that session that we did go to at Kailua with Uncle Shan.
The cohort wanted to kind of switch things up, and two of the nurses wanted to host. They wanted to really address that host-guest concept. And so we went out to Kalailua, which is out in Ever Beach, and this place, Kalailua Legacy and Heritage Foundation, sits on land that was previously occupied by the military, by the Navy. It is the old Barbers Point Naval Station. And this land was given back to the community through during the Clinton administration, when the military bases were closing. The land was given back. But one of the things that came out of this was that as the lands were turned over and the bases were closed, the military was forced to work with communities to see how best to use that land and not just abandon the land. So out of this came Kalailua and Uncle Shad Khane, and what he does out there is he tells the story of this particular place through time, from the 16, 15, even before the 1500s. And he brings this place through modern day. And he tells the stories that Uncle Shad tells really does connect this place to its occupants and their view of their sense of place throughout time. And so it was a place where it hit home for this cohort on seeing that sense of place changes, it evolves through Uncle Shad's storytelling with how it was from the first arrivals, the first foreign arrivals, which were from Tahiti to Hawaii. Then he talked about actual mapping and the voyaging societies, sailors that came from different countries getting here. And then he talked about the actual and how people from different nations started to call Hawaii their home. And he posed the question, which I think was very important for each and every one of us, was, well, how long does it take for someone who is not of this place to start to recognize this place as home? So how many generations does it take now if you came from Tahiti and assimilating to Hawaii? How long does it take for Hawaii to now become your home and not Tahiti? And it was a really good question where each of us actually had to think about it and going, yeah, because when we told our stories, we realized we were from Okinawa, we were from the Philippines, we were from the continental US, we were from Hawaii. And so it is a place that we actually began to really, like I said, hit home for all of us in that sense of place, and that it does change over time.
You know, I'm going to expand on that. And again, we're in certain positions within our program. However, this was a huge learning process, not just for them, but for ourselves. And for myself, when I was listening to Uncle Shad and hearing the stories about the history and the background of Kalailua to where it is now and how many generations it would take, it actually, for the first time, made me really think about where I truly come from. Where did we originate from? I am fourth generation from Japan, from Hiroshima. And it really made me start to think about all the connections that we have from our past to where we are now and how we can build on that. It made me think about the community in which I worked in. For 15 years, I worked out in the North Shore on Oahu, which is Wailuhali'iwa area. And lucky enough, when I did start working in that area, one of the first things that I actually did because of my schooling was to really research the background and the history of that community. How often do we know when I'm driving past Whitmore and you're going past Kukaniloko, the birthing stones? How often are you driving down, not California Ave, yeah, California Avenue, and you have that healing stone that many identify with, and it's not just the Hawaiian culture, but other cultures. How often do we know those things within our community that play a very significant part of that community? So that discussion really made a lot of people think, including myself. And so it was really interesting going through this project that was intending to be for the staff. However, I did know that there's going to be a lot more that I still have to learn myself, because it's a different way. I have to say, it's a different way of we when we say we are learning leadership, when we are wanting to develop our leadership skills, so often do we come with a very Western style of thinking. However, it's a way of trying to blend both. You need both, a Western style as well as a way of our host culture, which is the native Hawaiian culture. And it's really important to understand this place in which we work. This is just a photo of some of our staff at Ho'oulu'aina. And this was a day that one of the things that we did was we did some kokua with puni, and we're picking some olena because we're harvesting the olena to use the leaves to preserve and dry for future use for women who are pregnant. And so part of this was so much of the stories behind learning from the others, even there at Ho'oulu'aina, and different people telling their different stories of that place. There's so much that we can share. The key of all of this project is really bringing it together with an experience. Again, earlier, as I said, I could not set up 7 sessions and define objectives for every single one because it probably would have gone over everyone's head. What we had to do is each session was built upon the one previous. And I think that was so important in this process. And although it is very challenging because we do have timelines and we need to get things done, we so much in this time and day really focus so much on a task that you must do, but it's about how you do it. Before you think about how you're gonna do it, is really thinking about understanding the places in which we are going to impact with healthcare and the different roles that we have in healthcare to support a culture of health. So this project that we began in looking at supporting a culture of health, we knew that there's so many things out there in the community that are already doing it. However, I believe the key thing for me was really about how do we make it as meaningful as possible for every community, every person. But in order to do that, we had to really learn from each other and the communities in which we work.
One of the things here in Hawaii, what we usually ask, we ask, where you from? That's what Nohea Mai Oi means, where are you from? But along with that, we ask, not only where you from, where you went to school, who's your parents, who's your family, who's your people? And it is one way that we learn about people's identities and we learn about the relationships or that you have. We also learn about the we factor and who you are as a we. And so what we did was one of our sessions, as we moved from individual identity to more where are we from, the cohort developed a poem, everyone contributing to this poem. So I do want to share this poem with you folks. You want to add anything to the poem before? It actually ended up, when we developed the poem, each of us developed a phrase within that poem. And as we recognized the identity of our group, as we moved from I to we, this poem just fell into place, and it really did represent a lot of the work that we did as public health nurses and the identity that they were able to connect with as a public health nurse during the process.
So if I can add, how many, and I can only see those of you in this auditorium, but how many of you have heard of the poem writing I am from? They do it in school, they do it in leadership programs. I am from. Well, a lot of times in leadership programs in school, to really figure out who I am, they ask you to write and they give you some guide on how to write this, where I am from. This was one of the leadership tools that actually was shared with me when I started the WJF leadership program for public health nurse leaders. And what was interesting is in continuing leadership in our community here in Hawaii, and the person, Cheryl Lupinui, that we do work with, actually merged into not where I am from, but it turned into we are from. And so she did a different take on how you do that leadership tool, which is we are from, which was really interesting because we actually used that and we took that tool back. I took that tool back to my cohort, which are public health nurse leaders across the nation. And it was really interesting that it brought the whole group together, not individually as all our separate I am from poems that we did on day one of our leadership program, but we actually concluded with a we are from poem. And so not only did we learn from this and apply it to my own leadership program that I was in, but in taking this to our staff and this cohort, we came up with this poem, We Are From.
Let me go ahead and start that.
Yeah. We are from hope and resiliency, no one left behind, looking at the greater good.
We are from compassion and heart.
We are from the other side of the angry parent phone call.
Working hard, doing the job. We are from the rock, solid and strong. We are from the rugs to reaches of knowledge and experience.
We are from mountain to Makai, always flowing like wind past the mountain and water.
We are from a profession where yes and is often our approach.
We are from where shame asks questions and there is no right or wrong answer. We are from where flying the plane before it's built.
We are from taking chances, seizing opportunity, never know your possibilities.
We are from a melting pot, a stew rich in culture, diversity, and life. We are from long drives down the coast, sand and sea to our left, Ohio and to our right.
We are from the sounds of the ocean and the cries of hungry children.
We are from I Hear You.
We are from transforming our culture of public health nursing by understanding and embracing our sense of place.
I know, sorry about the audio. That was just impromptu videotaping them sharing that. What I'd like to do is if Gloria, you can just go through it in the
Yeah.
slide.
I'll read it for those that are online. So the poem goes, we are from hope and resiliency, no one left behind, looking at the greater good. We are from compassion and heart. We're from the other side of the angry parent phone call. We're from working hard and doing the job right, cooking large family meals while we talk story in the kitchen, kanikapila in the backyard while the keiki play, and being pono, ha'a and mihi. We're from the rock solid and strong, rags to riches of knowledge and experience. We're from Mauka to Makai, always flowing like wind past the mountain and water towards the sea. We are from yes and is often our approach. We are from no shame asked questions and there is no right or wrong answer. We're from flying the plane before it's built. We're from taking chances, seizing opportunity, never knowing your possibilities. We're from a melting pot, a stew rich in culture, diversity, and life. We're from long drives down the coast, the sand and the sea to our left, the heart of the land to our right. We're from the sounds of the ocean and cries of hungry children. We are from We Hear You. We are from transforming our culture of PHN by understanding and embracing our sense of place. And so we end today with public health nursing and who we are. Public health nursing is an expansion of the Department of Health into every community statewide. We listen and we respond to communities' needs based on our clinical knowledge and relationship with individuals, families, and communities.
To add to that, when people came and decided to come here to attend this leadership in service, I don't know what you all expected. What we are doing is something very different. It is something that feels right. And we taking, my motto is Chansam, local style, because it's really about knowing and understanding the meaning behind the things that we do and the people in which we work with in the communities. And I think that's the really important piece of this. And so this is not your normal leadership tools. It's not your normal leadership program. It is something different, but a way that really needs to incorporate the sense of place of Hawaii. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is Valerie, and we're ready to take questions or comments. Anyone in the audience and online, can you just type it in the chat or the Q&A, and I will read them. Does anybody have a question yet? Okay, get something going, it can be a comment. So I really appreciate how you created the grounding sense of leadership. It's such a different way. So do you have all the tools you gave us were so refreshing. Do you talk about the actual definition of leadership? Because you really offer a different definition. So could you just explain that a little more?
When I asked earlier to think about someone that you see as a leader that you respect and what those qualities or characteristics they have, what we hope is that when I look at leadership, it is shared. It is not something that, and an example is when I walked into this position, I am not about hierarchy, but I walked into a hierarchy that people expected, Joan, you're the branch chief, give us the answer. And how often do we even do that to the folks that are in different positions? What I'm really trying to do is change this culture of looking at leadership in something that looks more horizontal, sometimes diagonal, but in different ways and not just something that is vertical. And it's something that if we bring shared leadership together, it's about recognizing, this is my definition. And what I hesitate to do is put a definition on it, because each of you should come up with what that means to you. What it means to me is that when I work in this program in the role that I have as a public health nursing branch chief, what I do is I have to constantly tell staff from clerical, LPNs, PMAs, nurses, everybody that is part of this group, that we are working side by side and not top down. Yes, when it comes to decision making, certain times we need to do it in that manner, but we need to be flexible about knowing when to do that, but when to truly spend a lot of time with shared leadership. Most often when we see leadership, we think of a lot of power sitting with a person or a group of people. Shared leadership is truly something that comes authentically through the group. And each group will come up differently. If I take these leadership skills that I build within myself and our public health nursing branch, how will that look with my nurses that are out in Miloli'i or out in Waimanalo or out in not just Kalihi Valley, because Lower Kalihi Valley is very different from Upper Kalihi Valley. So when you do hear me talk Stari, I will always ask people where you come from. And the reason is every community is so different. And so that leadership is what that means to you and how you would define it. We so often try to memorize the term. It's a very Western way of thinking versus something that's more internal, that's going to have so much more meaning. So for me, when I think about it, I really think shared leadership, what it will look like, is something that we're standing all side by side. We need all different roles, all different public health professionals, along with all kinds of community members. Because the people that I work with in the community setting were one of those communities that I learned so much from them, more than I did in any textbook or any class. And I think part of that shared leadership is integrating them and the knowledge that I gained from them as well.
Nothing more to add. You did it. Other questions?
Other questions?
Yes, there are other questions. Let me first, right after you finish, somebody said, love it. And then somebody else said, thank you so much for the depth of this presentation. And then the first question online, how can this sense of place leadership learning be expanded to ally health care professionals like social workers or even clergy on all islands?
So when you ask me questions, I can come up with like 10 million ideas on how to do this, but it's not about my idea. My question to that person who wrote that, how you think. And if you know my style, sorry, okay, the local style coming out, cannot help it. when you ask me one question, you are going to get a question back, because if you're asking me for the answers when the answer should be coming from you, and you probably know. So think about the person that wrote that question. Think about what you think, how it could be integrated. I'm not a social worker. I work with lots of social workers, and I love all these different public health professionals that I work with. How do you think that could be integrated into it? One of the things that we are actually trying to do, we are looking at trying to expand this potentially to a neighbor island, potentially to work with a organization. We actually were thinking about working more with Kohala Center on the Big Island, because Sharalupe Nui is there. And it's not just for nursing, but it can be integrated into any profession, any program, and it's not one or the other. But what you need to think about is, how do you think? Because you probably know and have some ideas of how you could incorporate it in the place in which you work. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it's someone on Maui, and I appreciate his comment in that you're using two key words here that we all love, all professions love, shared and collective leadership. And the leading edge stuff coming out of the feds and everywhere is interprofessional teams. So what you're really saying is that we can have a shared leadership approach with anyone, a community member that doesn't have any profession to the most educated person, because we're going to say use the tools. Yes. And that what happened in the video, you're going to start with, you know, the basic process. So I think that it's just lovely. That's my 2 cents on that, because there's some more coming in.
And that was one of the points that we did drive home with them, of that the use of the tools, if they were open to and willing to use the tools, it was a way of bringing people together. Who doesn't like to eat? I mean, everybody loves to eat. And so we talked about how viewing health differently. And, you know, usually when we have community meetings, we come, everybody brings something. You know, can we now have an activity using one of the tools and saying, you know, tell us about the dish that you bought. Why does it have meaning to you? Or why did you choose to bring this dish today? Tell us a story about why this dish. And it was a way to start to break down those barriers, start to break the ice, and look at more commonalities and starting to connect with people by using the tools that were introduced through it. We actually, when we looked through when we started to count the tools and what we introduced, we didn't realize that we incorporated so many. I think in our first round, we kind of stuck to the more general, large themes. And then when we dug deeper, we realized, you know, reflection is a tool, journaling is a tool. It is a way to bring people together. You know, when you leave a meeting and there's next steps, it is one of those things that, you know, think about it. Write down some of your thoughts. Write down some of the emotions that you felt today. And it was a way to start to connect everyone within that own group. And like what Joan said, we as a group came in as individuals. When the cohort, and I'm not going to say that the cohort ended, it actually transformed into something new. But when we got to that stage of transition and transformation, we transformed and transitioned as a we group and not the individual I's.
Great. More comments are coming in. Next, great perspective. This is from Lori. What new programs or strategies of approach to health has this, I'm thinking she's talking about the Culture of Health program, initiated? And I know several of your programs really have taken off since you have had this grant. Do you just want to share some of those?
Other projects that we've done around a culture of health? So I think it's not just our projects, but there's so many projects, or what I call community work, that come from the community. When you have the group of folks, Micronesian and Chukis out in the Waipahu area, the Pupu area, and they're coming together to teach sewing classes. They're coming together to feel good about something that I now can do and be part of this community in Hawaii. I still have my heritage and my background, my culture of who I am as Chukis or who I am as Marshallese. But what they're doing is now created a group, a website that actually the goal is that the group will take over, and they have 2 advisory boards, one of people, men and women who are Chukis, another advisory board of folks that are men and women of Marshallese background. And so there's so many different community work. I don't like calling it projects. Things that are coming very, what's the word? From the ground up, from the people.
Grassroots.
Grassroots, we're learning from it. We learn from it, we share it with other people. There's so many different things that are occurring. What I ask you, again, see, you asked me a question, I'm gonna ask you back. Think about the community in which you work. Today, when you drive through the freeway, maybe go off and look at the signs and the things in your community. You're bound to ask questions about, I wonder where that's coming from. There's so many things in the community. So what I just spoke of is a group of people in Waipahu, Marshallese and Chukis, that are not only learning how to sew as a skill, but learning how to speak their own language, because it's multiple generations now, and it's a generation that it's been born and raised in Hawaii, not in Chuk, not in Marshalls. And so what they're doing is learning the language of their culture to help them connect. And there's so many more, but I don't think we have time.
So there's about 6 more. So most of them are comments and a couple have questions. So from Leimomi, mahalo for this amazing perspective, exclamation mark. So often we forget we are part of the whole. We are not a singular event in our lives, but rather an accumulation of our experiences and relationships. Mahalo for reminding and making me think. From Tracy Wise, thank you for sharing your experience and actual process for collective leadership. I like how this experience is always evolving, changing, dynamic, innovative, welcoming, and giving and receiving. Through this, there is for all involved, the individual, the worker, the family, and most of all, the community. I love the fluidness and confidence that anyone and everyone can lead and should lead, because we're not all knowing, but we're all together complement and supplement to make the whole more of the whole community. From Nicole Jones, thank you. From Paolo Tomo, I'm sorry, John, I'm messing up. This is from Tomoso on Maui. He's explaining his name. He has a master's in social work, and I love the sense of place. And Maui no Ikeoli is one of those places, and I'm also an Episcopalian priest. So he's the one that asked that. From Susan Anderson, thank you for the wonderful presentation. Learning from community participation in a specific place is hopeful. So you've given hope today, inspiration. From Dwayne, I appreciate your focus on building a stronger leadership foundation. Have any of the new leader proposed ideas, plans, or goals that they want to use their new skills to focus on going forward? So he's asked this in 2 places. So he's really asking, are there any new leaders, I think, proposing to use these new skills going forward? And do you know where it's going?
So we're all leaders. We all come at different levels of leadership, and we keep learning about who we are as a leader. What came of this group is we started with 10, and it went down to 8. Those that stayed with the group for the full 7 session chose to continue for, I don't remember. We continued. They wanted it. It was not us telling them, this is what we want you to do. They said, we think we really need to learn more about this and continue to meet to discuss. So they met for several sessions. We continued at Ho'olu Aina. What they've done, fast forward, is that they actually decided to convene. It came from the group, not Gloria,
us.
I, or Cheryl, but they decided to start a second group to support this in public health nursing. And what they chose to do is not only include staff, but include all the supervisors. And I do have Kuliana to make all the supervisors attend.
Great. Susan Anderson had an idea of storytelling. Does Civil Beat know what you're doing? I think they would like to know and extend awareness. Thanks again. So that might be, it might be nice to have this featured. Cherish said, awesome. such a strength-based and inclusive approach. That's the social workers really grabbing that. I'm a social worker and love this leadership perspective. Aaron, I just want to thank the Hawaii Public Health nurses for all their hard work. They have been an integral part of the community and great support network. And then someone else just said, awesome. So I think we're at the bottom. Has that inspired anybody here in the auditorium to make a comment or ask a question? I'm ready to run over with the mic. Anybody else? One's online.
If I can just add, if anyone wants to connect with us after the fact, you do have our contact information on the flyer, I believe, and that they can contact us directly if they want to talk story about it a little bit more and how to integrate it into the work that they do as well.
Well, and it's easy to look you up on the website. Just put in Department of Health, Public Health Nurses, and you'll get the branch office at Lanakila. And I know this because I called over there to talk to Joan and Gloria before they presented. So I've already tested that. So can I just ask one, so we do have a little more time. The thing I really like about the Robert Wood Johnson group, and I think I get the same sense from you, is that they really do innovative grant proposals or seek innovative grant proposals. And then, as you said, the grant is ended, but you're keeping it going on your own, which is the dream of Robert Wood Johnson to sustain. But do you see them, well, how do you feel about them? Do you see them coming up with a next quantum leap? It may not be right in this track, but they always have something innovative coming down the tube. Are you always watching or connected or following up on that? Can you kind of tell us maybe some of your future plans or your vision?
What I like to do is look for things that will fit into the things that we are doing and not we try to fit into them. What I love about our WJF is if you just sign up for their emails, I constantly get the funding and the different types of projects. I look at them. I just sent one over to some friends that work with Chukis and Marshallese and that basketball league that they always have, that annual basketball league at Palama Settlement. And there's a lot of opportunities, not just for us, but for others as well. I actually did apply for another grant that we were lucky was specific to our public health nurse leader group. I didn't get it, but it just offered me an opportunity to learn how to put something together and really made me think about how we want to expand this. And that's why we were thinking about expanding it to, our proposal was to expand it to the Hawaii Island and work with Kohala Center so that it is not just public health nurses, but the community work in which they do, and not just Kohala Center, but others in that area. So we're constantly looking and we want to expand. And within our own public health nursing branch, we're still trying to influence the rest of our branch to understand it. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It's a cultural shift in the way that we have been running and functioning. It's a huge shift, but a shift that I feel is right.
With what's going on right now on the Big Island with the volcano, I'm just wondering, I'm sorry.
It's a little easier for you.
I'm just concerned about what are we doing to help out the folks. As a social worker, largely it causes a lot of anxiety, what do you want to say, a community of anxiety, just like the homelessness does. And those are two issues that I think that collectively as social workers and health workers, we ought to be addressing. The anxiety and fear that both homelessness on our streets causes all of us, not just the folks affected directly. But as a child walks down the street and they question their mother about this, and then mother is affected, what does she say? What do we say to our children? And of course, the same thing that's going on right now with the folks that are suffering from the ash and the physical part of the volcano.
So what we're doing with Hawaii Island and the lava flow, we from the Department of Health, not just from Public Health Nursing, collective from the Department of Health, are working together to support. We actually look at what is occurring on a regular basis, all day, all night, to watch what is necessary. I can speak for public health nursing as one part of an entire team from the Department of Health that is responding, not separately, but alongside with state civil defense, Hawaii County civil defense, on looking at how to approach that. So I can speak for our nurses. We're among multiple staff out there passing out the N95 masks yesterday. We're out there several times a week assessing shelters, but it's an organized way of approaching how we're responding to that. If you each want to look at how you can support it as well, my suggestion is volunteer for American Red Cross, volunteer for Medical Reserve Corps that comes under our Disease Outbreak Control Division in the Department of Health. So everybody online, check it out, become a volunteer. We really utilize them, because what will happen is we utilize the staff there. But if we have staff, like for us, we do have staff that live in that area and that one has already been evacuated. And so we also want to take care of our own staff. That goes for anybody within the Department of Health as well as all the residents there. And so what we want to do is, if we can support them, we have our nurses on call, not on call, but not standby. We're on alert in case we need to even support, because we've done that in the past. If we don't have enough staffing for the Department of Health there, we are ready to support if need be. And like I said, it's not just PHN, it is the entire Department of Health, along with Medical Reserve Corps, along with the Red Cross.
And if you are interested in becoming a Medical Reserve Corps volunteer, there is a website that you can enter through. It's called Nalima Kako'o, and you can register there.
Candace, just email me. I'm a Medical Reserve Corps volunteer, and Margie Teo is, and we have quarterly meetings, and then there's a few trainings, and so we have a lot of different health professionals, and you don't have to be health professionals. Any emergency just needs people to help organize others. So if you're just willing to volunteer, we take it. So email me, and Marjorie will be so happy if I send out a little blast about how to become an MRC. And as she said, MRC gets called the most to help with all kinds of special events in the islands. We help with eye exams, we help with dental, we help with the flu shots, all that sort of thing. But if there's an emergency, like the public health nurses, we're asked to go to help man and woman the shelters. So that's where we usually go first, unless we're really in a disaster like what's happening on the Big Island and you just have to help people evacuate key areas or something like that. So there's great hope, Candace, on this. Yeah, and then we still have a few more minutes, but just to bring it back to what you're doing, I think this talk could not be, the response is so positive, it could not be at a better timing, and to get you at the end of your project when you're like on your A game, and now you have a whole new fan base here. So if you were to go back and compose an email, if people wanted to partner with you, I think you have people who are interested in partnering, especially island by island, because you are one of those magic threads throughout our state that really links us all health-wise in the community, because you're always in the community. So I just wanted to say that, if you would compose it, or I can send out your slide or whatever is appropriate. And then the second thing that really struck me, because when you were doing your title, I said, I don't quite get this title, but now I totally get it, is that it's so appropriate for Hawaii, because we are out in the middle of the Pacific. We really have to be grounded here, and we have to be grounded in things that we enjoy and then working together as a group, and food and a sense of place and who we are and all of that. You showed us beautifully. You had wonderful pictures, so thank you for that. I don't know if you have any closing comments, or are there any other questions or comments?
Well, thank you. And again, if you are interested, please don't hesitate to connect with us to learn more about it. But you don't just learn from us, you learn from so many different people. How I started to think about sense of place was decades ago. And people would ask me, so what's your objective of what you're doing? And I'm like, I don't know. It's really about an experience. What's your objective? And it's really about an experience. And it's taken years for me to come to this place, and now where I can actually share this with others. Everything in which we do is together, not us as professionals in the community. We're part of that community as well, including the ones in which we live. How do we participate differently, collectively, collaboratively, coordinated all together? So many people side by side, walking side by side together is, to me, such a empowering picture rather than one individual at a time. And so thank you all for coming and attending. And like I said, if you do want to connect with us, feel free to contact us via email. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the survey will be sent out by Camille as soon as I end this Zoom, and those in the auditorium, will you fill out the blue one? And thank you everybody for attending.